Good afternoon, brothers and sisters. How are y'all today? So today we have an interesting topic. Today's topic is about our practices. The topic for the day. I'm going to change the topic a bit. So the topic is supposed to be misery and joy. I'm going to change it into misery or joy. I think maybe it makes more sense. As a matter of fact, it was inspired by a question posted by a student. One of them had this question about what? About, let me just, I almost clicked the wrong button. It's basically about this, there's a student in one of the recent meditation class. She asked about how to have joy in our practices, and in particular meditation. So I thought maybe make it more generic, to just refer to practices. And then I thought, maybe some of us do get joy in our practices, but maybe sometimes when we do our practices, we may feel misery, So I decided to have the title misery and joy, or misery or joy in our practices. So let's get started. Let me switch to the whiteboard. Get the whiteboard over. It's actually black in color, but the screen would become white. Or rather, the screen is white. Let me switch it over here. Okay, good. Misery or joy in our practices. So we could also extend this even further to include our life, the things we do. But let's start off with practices. Okay. Let me see. Let me just look through the messages before we start. Good afternoon again to all those who just joined us. Let me see if there's anybody who posted anything already. Okay, so practices. Let me just write it down here first. Practices. What are the kind of practices we do? Maybe y'all can write into the comments the kind of practices that you all do on a regular basis. It can be practices that you do on a daily basis. It can be practices that you do once a week or a few times a week. So let's start off with meditation. Let me just write down meditation here. because this is the question from Li Hui. She asked this question, and that's how we got started with it. What other practices do you all do? Nobody? You all don't do practices, ah? Is the message? Oh, okay. Chanting, mindfulness, chanting. Okay, let's try that. And then we have 慈心观 metta. So metta is part of meditation. And then we have yoga. Yes, that's okay. Yeah, you can include whatever practice you are doing, okay? We don't have to limit it to Buddhist practices for now. And then what else? Let me see. Attending Dhamma talks. Yes, very good. What else? Dana. Share. Not too sure what the share is, but I would presume it's a bit like dana. Maybe Ai Hui, you can clarify the sharing part. Chanting sutra, reading sutra. So we can put this maybe nearby here. So reading sutra / Dhamma books. And then offering foods help. Very good. Let me just shrink this down a bit so we have more space. So we have help. So dana means to give, okay? Yeah, so dana itself, the word dana is a Pali Sanskrit word which means to give. Yeah. So you can give help, you can share. In a way, share is more like a parallel. Okay, so you can give many things. You can give help, you can give material things. What else? Recitation, walking meditation. Okay, very good. So we have walking meditation, and then chanting and recitation is similar. Yeah, the practice of chanting started off as a form of recitation actually. Wee Hun says, I also have an inertia to do chanting on my own. Maybe I'm lazy or I do not really enjoy it. Yes, that's part of it, and we're going to explore more of it today. So we have a copy of Sutra. Yeah, I'll explain a bit more of some of these practices later. Giving, charity work. So this is under dana. So charity. Reading books. Okay. Okay, that's included just now. Reading of Dharma books. Mindful going about my daily life. Yeah, yes, that's very good. So let's put that in. Mindfulness. Yeah, in the daily life. Prep of food and getting rid of ants. Yeah, that's quite strong. Okay, let's just write it down. Getting rid of ants without killing them. Good. Memory. Let me just write it down first. Maybe Alison, you can clarify what you mean by memory. When you say memory practices, and then exercise, I'm going to put it somewhere near yoga, okay? Because for many people they do yoga as a form of exercise. Sharing of your Facebook live. Okay. So I'm going to just put it as sharing of Dharma. Okay. So share Dharma. And sending loving kindness to people we don't get along with. That will be under metta. Loving kindness is metta itself. This is basically loving kindness. Okay, we're going to add in a few more before we look at the whole set. And then we have gratitude. Yes, sila. Putting 5 precepts in practice. So this is under sila. 5 precepts. Okay, bhavana is actually related to meditation, but I'm going to just write it down here. Bhavana. Should be sharing of your Facebook live. On live 共修, online live 共修. So 共修, I'm going to put it next to chanting here. Online wisdom and right thought, right view. Reciting of 弟子规, put the values into practice. That will be under chanting recitation. Wisdom and right thought, right view. I would put that under near to the reading of Sutra. Wisdom and right thought, right view. Wisdom, right thought, right view. Offering of water and light to the triple gem. Okay. So water and light to triple. Oh, what am I writing? To triple gem. Okay, I think that's about it. That we can add in more later. We have water, incense, fruits. Okay, we can definitely add in a lot more and potentially spend, wow, that was like 10-15 minutes, 10 minutes of writing. Yeah. Okay, so we have quite a bundle here. So let's take a look. So we have the different kinds of practices. Yeah. For a start, I'm going to focus on the more so-called traditional Buddhist practices. Okay. And then I'll extend a bit more outwards. Yeah. So this question, the original premise was, so the student is posed this very interesting question, and I wonder whether it applies to you all. So this student tries to meditates on a regular basis. And so recently in one of the, I think it was during the retreat, was it a class or retreat? I think mentioned in during the retreat about the fact that while she tries to meditate on a regular basis, but she don't find any joy in it. Yeah, I thought that question was very good. Yeah. It's very good, not because I'm happy that she don't find joy, you know. Usually when we hear people sharing about their practices, we tend to hear the positive story, the success story. Oh, this person did meditation and found calmness and peace, you know. This person do chanting and then it gave him or her so much courage and strength, you know. This person do this practice, that practice, and it has transformed their lives miraculously. Yeah, I thought that students sharing about in a way the negative success story, the not so successful story, is very good, because the truth is, I don't think everybody immediately find joy in their practices. I think for some people, you may do certain practices for a while, and initially you may feel good about it, and then sometimes after a while you may not feel too much joy. Yeah. Or for some people, right from the start until the present day, you just don't feel joy. Yeah, you don't feel excited. You don't feel anything. You know, maybe. Yeah, but you still do it simply because, okay, logically speaking, it seems to be a good thing to do. Yeah, or because, you know, all your Buddhist friends are doing it, or maybe because the Buddhist text says that you should do this, or maybe the teacher, yeah, myself. Maybe, yeah, or maybe whichever community you belong to, that's the practice they do. So you do it. Yeah, but what happens if you don't find joy? Yeah, so I think this is a very good question, because oftentimes we look at the model answer, you know, the model story. or people practice, you get joy. People practice, you get results. Yeah, and the two are linked. That if we practice and we don't get results, then more often than not we don't feel joy. And I think it can be applied to many of these things we do, including even yoga. Yeah, like if you keep on doing yoga, but you just don't find yourself improving in terms of your flexibility, in terms of your well-being, or you do exercises, but you just continually for a year you do your practices, your exercise, but your health just don't improve. Yeah, then I think it's hard to sustain, right? So why do we not experience joy, and what should we do? So I shared in some classes about how so going back to the when do we feel joy, and perhaps why do we feel joy? There are perhaps many reasons why we feel joy in our practices, and it boils down to a simple thing about that we feel gratified, we feel satisfied, or we feel like we are pretty good doing it, yeah, at doing it. So take for example meditation. If let's say when you do meditation, you sit and your leg is painful, yeah, or you sit and your mind is all over the place. You sit and you're drowsy. Maybe if this happens in the first few sessions, maybe you'll still try. But if trying it for a few more times and you don't see progress, yeah, then you may start to feel disheartened and your joy may start to decrease, yeah. So the question I have here is, how do we measure our progress? How do we measure whether we are doing it well? Yeah, be it meditation, be it observing of precepts, be it any of the practices that we have here. Yeah, we probably go through a few of them as examples because we have quite a huge list here. Yeah, and what would be a good measure, or for that matter, is there a right measure of doing it right? Yeah. So let's look at meditation for a start. When we say we do meditation, how many of you meditate hoping to be calm and peaceful? Maybe you all can write into the chat. Yeah, I don't know how long is the lag between me speaking and then it appears. I think it's perhaps like a few seconds. Yeah, so maybe you all can write down. But I would think that if you meditate with the thought, let me meditate so that I can be calm, there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. But the calmness itself, yeah, each time when we sit, do we definitely get calmness? There was this, I think there was this very interesting Q&A with Ajahn Chah that I read in one of the book. Yeah. Someone asked Ajahn Chah, like, why is it that some days when they sit, they have a good sitting. Some days when they sit, they don't have good sitting. And the strange thing is, when they are putting in a lot of effort, they may not necessarily get good sitting. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But the strange thing is that when they do get good sittings, it may well be that they are not really putting in extra effort. Yeah. So why? So Ajahn Chah's answer was very most interesting. He said, it is like going to work. You work every day, but you don't get paid every day. Until at the end of the month, then you get paid. And on payday itself, you may well not be working. Now this maybe requires a bit of explanation. So when we meditate, we are planting the seeds. Yeah, we are doing the work. But it doesn't mean that you meditate and immediately you get the results. Yeah, straight away. So you accumulate the, if we can use some modern terms, it would be like the momentum in the mind, yeah, the potential in the mind to be calm, to be quiet. And as we do meditation today, tomorrow, we do this week, next week, over time, that potential builds up until a certain critical point. Then it manifests, it arises as an experience of that calmness. Yeah. In the Buddhist tradition, we use the analogy of seeds, yeah, or wholesome roots, where you plant the seeds, and then eventually at some point, yeah, that practice culminates in that ripening of the calmness. Yeah. So sometimes when you practice, you may not immediately get the results. Yeah. So if we were to measure the quality of our practice in terms of whether we get calmness or not, then we may well be setting ourselves up for failure. Yeah, because you don't always get calmness. If you expect that you must always get calmness, then you will probably give up very quickly. Yeah. So having the right expectations of our practice is important. The right goal. Whether the goal is number one, what the practice is meant to deliver, to produce, and number two, when it should produce. So meditation. The other thing is, some other students then ask, what if I've been doing this practice for a while, yeah, or how long, and I still don't get any results? Should I still continue? Yeah, and that student then asks, like, what if I simply don't have the flair? Yeah. So there are some people with more affinity than others. Yeah, but if you don't have affinity, then I would say all the more we should start planting the affinity. All right. I like what some of you wrote. Jaslyn wrote, meditate as part of practice, not looking for any outcome. The thing is, even the so-called good sitting, the calmness we experience, is subject to causality, to conditions. When there are no conditions, you cannot simply say, I meditate and will myself to have calmness. Make myself calm. You cannot do that. When there are conditions, then calmness arises. When there's conditions, distracting thoughts arise. All we are doing is planting the seeds, or changing the conditions. That's all we can do. And it includes whether we feel joy or not. It includes even apart from our practices, in our daily life, are we happy or sad? Are we angry or mad? Are we joyful, or not? Like, think about it. Right now, at this moment, just for 5 seconds, try to be angry for 5 seconds, right now. And let me know in the comments whether you are able to do that. Like, right now, be angry. Any of you managed to do that? Chances are, you may try, and you'll find that you cannot just make yourself angry like that. Or now, just make yourself happier than you are now. Yeah, just like that, happy. Can or not? Cannot. You see, even our emotions, even our mental states is subject to conditions. If you think about it, it's quite mind-blowing. Yeah, 2 days ago I was reflecting on this when I was doing my sitting, and I was observing my mind. I was observing the sitting, and I reflected on this, and I thought, we cannot even control our emotions, as in we cannot make ourselves happy, make ourselves sad, you know. And that's why when someone is angry, if you just tell a person don't be angry, the person can't help it, you know, because the conditions, both external and internal, has come together, and a huge part of the condition is our internal conditions, which is that there's some grasping onto the external conditions. There are some views, there are some knots inside, yeah. And so as a result, when all that come together, anger arises. When different set comes together, joy arises, yeah. So if you look at all the Buddhist practices, those that is used to mitigate anger, mitigate the defilements, it works on the causes. It works on the causes and conditions, not on the anger directly, because the anger is the result. The defilements are the result. You cannot simply just say no defilement. I mean, it would be good if you can, but if you can't do that, that means you have absolute control. Yeah. So, yeah, the closest you can get to that kind of absolute control is by diverting your mind away from the object that triggered your emotions. Yeah. So, extending from this example, I've asked you all to try. The same goes for all the practices. Yeah. When you do all those practices, whether joy arises or not, there must be conditions. And whether those conditions arise or not, you need more conditions. Yeah. Now, what about the other practices? Yeah, we talk about meditation, about chanting, about recitation. For those of you who do chanting, sometimes when we do chanting, we feel very, what do you call that? I've heard of students who tear, yeah. I don't say cry. Cry means that you are emotionally charged, yeah. Many times when students share with me that tears come out when they chant, it is not the kind of sad emotions, yeah. As a matter of fact, it is not an uncommon experience, yeah. In the past, when I chant the Lu Xiang San, right at the end, yeah, Namo Xiang Yun Gai Hu Sa Mo Ho Sa, yeah, yeah, tears will just come off, and it can be a very uplifting experience, yeah, not a sad experience. Now the question is, when we feel that way, yeah, when we do chanting, or when we do the practice of dana, when we do giving, we help others, yeah, and extended to that, we volunteer our services, and so on and so forth, or even attending Dharma talks, we may feel uplifted. We may feel, wow, this high, you know, yeah, this joy. But what if sometimes you don't experience it? Yeah. What if sometimes you don't experience it? Then do you stop doing that practice? Or does it mean that you're doing it wrong? I mean, after all, I don't think it's while it's not uncommon, I don't think everybody start tearing whenever they do chanting, right? Yeah. And at the first place, was that the intention? That when we do chanting, we should be tearing? Was it meant to make us tear? Yeah. The short answer is no. I don't see in any places that says, oh, that 诸佛子若读诵受持时，哇，应痛哭泪涕。That is not the core premise. Yeah. So one of the things I want to share and highlight today is that even in the case of doing some practices, if you don't feel joy, we shouldn't then give up. Yeah, we shouldn't then give up, because more often than not, for most of us, when we experience joy in our practices, it is somewhat colored with delight and grasping, or to put it simply, attachment. Yeah, we like that feeling, and it's more an emotional thing than not. Nothing wrong with it in a way, because it's an experience. Yeah, but the question is, what do we do with it? If we experience it and it inspires us to further our practice without attachment, then the next time when we do, or the next 10 times when we do the practice and we don't feel joy, it's okay. We can still continue with our practices. But if we experience the joy with attachment, what's the implication? It means that if after that there's no more joy, then we don't feel like practicing. This is one easy way to look at our experience of joy, whether there's attachment. Why? Because if there's no attachment, there's no aversion when you don't get joy. Yeah? There's no longing for that joy again. Yeah? So whether you get a joy or not, it's okay. In a way, the joy is how do I put it? The joy is secondary. Yeah, it's secondary. Yeah. So, and this applies to, I would say, a huge part of all the other practices. One thing that is interesting to note, the practice of gratitude. The practice of gratitude. Yeah, this is where there's a bit of exception. So, when we do the practice of gratitude, it should, well, first and foremost, evoke gratitude. Yeah. So this practice in Buddhism, this practice basically starts off with looking at the things you have, yeah, and then reflecting on the source of those things. Yeah. It can be material, it can be immaterial. Yeah? Yeah, this is not simply about a materialistic reflection. It is reflecting on the source of whatever we have, and it leads to contentment, it leads to appreciation of the effort, it leads to gratitude. Yeah. So, and with that, then it leads to joy towards both those who contributed to what we have, contributed to our well-being, contributed to the presence of what we require and what we want, yeah, and also leads to joy, yeah, from that contentment. Yeah, to consider that whatever we have didn't come easy, and not just through ourselves, yeah, but through many individuals. Yeah, and many resources. So that this practice of gratitude actually is based on wisdom. Yeah, wisdom by reflecting on conditions, and which is linked to the emptiness of all phenomena. Yeah, and that's how in Buddhism we develop gratitude. Yeah, and through gratitude, it also help us to overcome pride. Yeah, we may be successful in a certain way. Yeah, but if we are to reflect on our success, that success is not simply through our own effort, not singular, not just by ourselves, but through the efforts of many individuals. Yeah. So this is one thing that I want to highlight, because if you practice gratitude, joy is the expected outcome. The rest a bit different. The rest of it is a bit different. The practice of sila, I want to just also touch on the practice of sila. One of you is calling me. I can't take calls at this point, Rod. So I'm not sure why you are calling me at this point, because I'm currently in class, in session. One of these friend from Thailand, met him in one of the conference. I think it was part of the. I was part of this delegation to the. What is that? The Mahachulalongkorn University in Thailand, northern Thailand. So we were part of the delegation, and I think during that trip, then he was one of the individuals who attended to the delegation. Not sure what he needs, but perhaps you can leave a message into the video. Okay, back to this thing about sila. So this thing about sila here, sila is not simply about precepts. Sila is about behavior, body and speech. And within the Buddhist teaching of the practices pertaining to our body and speech, 5 precepts is one of them. There's also the 8 precepts. But if we extend it further, then it can be extended to even activities in our daily life. So I like what one of you mentioned earlier about developing mindfulness. Developing mindfulness in our daily life. This is very important. And the example given was preparation of food, and while doing that, sometimes there are ants and you need to remove the ants, but to do it mindfully without killing them. I want to spend a bit of time to talk about the opposite, where just now I talk about joy. What if you don't have joy, and how can you have? What do you do if you don't have joy, right? What about the reverse? How about if you experience misery? So just now mentioned about when we do meditation, sometimes we feel a lot of pain, or perhaps we even feel frustrated. Just very quickly, a huge part of that again comes with either the wrong expectations, so we don't get the expected results, but it could well be due to the wrong expectations. The other aspect of misery sometimes is that when we are doing our practice, then we may encounter circumstances that put us in a spot. Like for example, I have students, when they attend Dharma talks, they feel stressed. And some of them shared with me the reason. They said because their family members are against them attending Dharma talks. So some of them even have to lie to their family members. And so because of the lying, then they feel bad about attending Dharma talks. So I shared with them, I said, well, you have to ask yourself, are you doing something bad? Are you doing something unethical? Or are you doing something good? Just because your family or friends, or anyone for that matter, just because someone is unhappy with us for doing something, be it attending Dharma talks, be it doing charity, or anything for that matter, you have to ask yourself, is the person upset objectively because of your actions, or is it because of the subjective experience? We're not denying people of their subjective experience. But we have to know that subjective experience cannot be accounted for. We cannot be responsible for people's subjective experience. Yeah? Because otherwise, then there can be some random people out there, yeah, who says that, oh, you all shouldn't do this practice or what. Like, what if someone out there says, oh, we shouldn't have this Dharma discussion, so should we then shut it down? Yeah. I don't think that's the way to live our life. Yeah. But if it produces objective harm, yeah, objective harm, then that's different. Like, for example, if you do your chanting at home, I sometimes tell my students this, yeah, it's almost like a joke, you know. It's a bit challenging, some of these practices, like doing chanting at home. If you choose to do chanting, you may have to consider the objective impact on your family. Yeah. So then you may have to do some adjustments. For example, I have some students who, on their own accord, decided to wake up very early to do meditation. Like, they would wake up at 5 to do meditation until 5:30, and then make preparations for breakfast, and then prepare their kids for school and so on. I mean, that was in the past, before the circuit breaker. But what if this student decided to do chanting at 5? Yeah. Can we still say that that's a subjective experience? No. Like, imagine if your family members wake up at 5 and then started going talk, 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 yeah, started doing chanting, then that has an objective impact on others. Yeah. So if we are doing chanting at home, then we may have to do some adjustment, either the timing or perhaps the way we do it. Yeah. We can do the chanting without the instruments. Yeah. In fact, for lay people, if you're doing it alone, there's lesser need to do it with the instruments. Yeah, the fa qi. Yeah. And the reason is because the fa qi in general is used to use in the assembly. That means when there's an assembly of the practitioners, be it monks or nuns, or the monks, nuns, and lay persons. Yeah, it's used to synchronize everybody. Yeah, and it's helpful for everybody to do the practice together in this way. So if you're doing chanting at home, you don't really have to, start hitting all the instruments and the fa qi. Yeah, the exception here is for monastics. Temple is designed for us to do the practice. Yeah, so I've heard of how there was a period of time I stayed in some of the centers, and some of the senior monks shared with us about how they got complained by neighbors for doing their chanting in the morning. Yeah, because in the morning they would strike the drum, and then after that the bell, and then they do the chanting. So the neighbors, for whatever reasons, for obvious reasons rather, get affected, and then they start calling up the police, they call up the URA or whatever, and the authorities came down, and then they had a meeting, and the senior monk told me that, yeah, they had a meeting, and then the authorities, the representative from the various bodies came, and then they had a discussion. And then they state the case that, when you do your chanting early in the morning, it disturbs the neighbors. So this senior monk raised a very interesting point. He said, our temple has been around for I think that temple has been around for some 80 years or 100 years or so, a very long time, many decades. He said that when they started off, the surrounding place was all empty, and then people started building houses nearby. So they said, he said, we have been around. If people choose to come and build their house next to us, it's not our fault that they choose to build out their house near to us. So, and people who buy the house know that the temple itself is very clear, this is the temple. So why should, them moving over require us to change our practices? Yeah. So I heard that in the end, it was sort of like agreed that they can still continue their practices. But for lay people, that's a bit different now. What else? The other practices, some are very specific, and I can't really tell the context. Yeah, how kind of practices that is, like the practice of memory. We've touched roughly on yoga exercises and attending Dhamma talks. Copy of Sutra. Yeah, so some of you may be wondering what this practice is about. So in the, at least from what I know, in the Chinese Mahayana tradition, there is this practice of copying of the sutra. And this practice is positioned as being very meritorious, very wholesome. And the reason is because back in the days, there's no printing press. You cannot simply just go online and download the sutras. So in order to have access to the sutra, you need to actually make a copy of the sutras that is currently available. Yeah, so in the past, individuals would painstakingly copy the sutras letter by letter, character by character. Yeah, so that practice itself is very meritorious because by doing that, others get access to the teachings. Yeah, it is not like now when you go to temples, there's like stacks of all the sutras, and sometimes nowadays we have the opposite problem where individuals out of piety, out of devotion would donate to print a lot of Buddhist texts, and in the end it's just collecting in the store because nobody read it. Yeah, nobody is reading them. Yeah, so today some centers still do this practice of copying of the sutra, but they use a very special kind of book where you use a brush and not use ink, but you use plain water, and you just write over. Yeah, you just write it over, so it can be reused, and it doesn't leave any stain. Yeah. So today, when you do that practice, it's a bit different from how it was in the past. In the past, it was purely functional, practical, and really meritorious because you are making a copy so that others can have access to it. Today, when we do that practice, it is in part to commit to memory the wordings of that sutra for ourselves, and in the process of doing it, developing mindfulness, developing some level of concentration as well. So so there are still some where they print those empty set of sutra, where it's the outline of the characters, and then they use the actual ink to write over it. Some seniors have shared with me about how when individuals do that practice, sometimes they just take blank books and then they copy existing sutra, and then they shared the trouble with doing that is most of our, if your handwriting is like mine, okay, my handwriting with the digitizer is very jialat, very bad. But my actual handwriting is not that much better. So if your handwriting is anything like mine, so the senior says, if the handwriting is not so good, after copying, nobody else can use it because people have a hard time reading it. Yeah, and if your handwriting is not legible or not pleasant, whoever is reading the sutra, you cannot blame people that if they are reading the sutra and the handwriting, is very messy, then people feel so this is what was shared by a senior, that as a result you have more problem. Yeah, and sometimes students, when they are copying, they make mistakes, and when they make mistakes, they may be aware, they may not be aware, and if they are not aware, then the copy is wrong. Then it's actually demerit instead of merit. Or if they are aware, then they go and blanco, they go and cancel it, then it's really quite messy. Yeah. So if you are doing the practice of copying of sutra, I would encourage you to use, brush with water to write over it. Yeah. So that you don't end up creating copies that cannot be used by anyone. Yeah. Unless you are very certain you can do it properly, yeah, then you can do that and then gift it to others. Yeah. What else? Alison explains memory development. Commit the suttas word by word to mind or remember a list of words. Okay. So then that would be similar to recitation. That would be a similar practice to recitation. Yeah. So any questions at this point? Yeah. By and large, when we do our practices, it shouldn't bring misery. Yeah. But if we look at the suttas, the Buddha actually mentioned that when a person do practices, we can experience a bit of suffering also. Yeah, it's quite interesting. And it is, what kind of suffering is that? It is a suffering that you cannot attain progress. Yeah, and so this is actually mentioned in some of the suttas. Yeah, and the other one is that when we do our practices, by and large, it requires us to give up our worldly pursuits. Yeah, because any of the practices, in fact, all the practices require time. Time taken for practices is time taken away from our worldly pursuits. This is, you can only do one thing at a time. Unless any of you are doing chanting while watching YouTube, please don't do that. Like you're watching Netflix video and then you are listening to Dharma talk, please don't do that. Yeah, I don't know how you do that, but if you are doing that, please don't do that. So the thing is, when we first do our practices, we are taking time out of our usual routine. So you are giving up on the worldly pursuits, worldly pleasures. So you experience the loss of the worldly pleasures already. But it doesn't mean that you immediately get joy. You immediately experience improvement. Yeah. So as a result, we sometimes experience regret. Yeah, maybe not misery, but we may experience regret. Yeah. So in the teachings under the 5 hindrances, we talk about this. Yeah, restlessness and worry. In the Chinese text, we talk about the regret over wrongdoings and regret over right doing. And this is the second category, regret over right doing, or misery, if you will. Yeah. So this is where we need to be clear, yeah, and have the right mindset, the right view towards our practices. We must know that the loss of the worldly pleasure is a short-term loss, yeah. But if you are to persist, yeah, persist in the practice, then in time you will bear fruit. In one of the sutta, the Buddha described how you don't immediately see results day by day. Yeah, you don't like, oh, today I do this much practice, so immediately I see this much changes. It doesn't work that way. But rather, the Buddha described saying, just as a carpenter, when he uses his tool, working on the wood, pieces of wood every day, you don't see any changes in the tools. Like if you use a hammer, day by day, he don't see any changes to the wooden handle. Or if he's using a file, yeah, he don't see any changes in the handles. But over time, when he examines the tools again, he will observe that the handle has been worn out. So the Buddha used this as an analogy that similarly, when we do our practices, if you practice and expect to see immediate result, yeah, after one sitting see immediate result, after one day immediately see results, that's not realistic. Yeah, but over time, yeah, over a period of time, then you compare, yeah, you will see results. I recently shared with some students this, and that oftentimes we don't see the differences, but when we compare with my senior shared, yeah, in fact my senior shared this about how if we keep up to a regular practice, over time you may not see any results. But when we he was talking to me in reference to our monastery in US, because our my ordination monastery is in US, yeah, Fayunsi. So the senior said, when you go back and you talk to your friends or others in Singapore, yeah, after a few years, when you go back and you talk to them, then you see a difference. Yeah. In between, you don't feel any difference. So keep this in mind. Otherwise, you may be overcome by the misery, or you may be disheartened and you will stop practicing. Doreen asked, how do we dispose the sutra after we have copied? Yeah, so this is the thing. Maybe we don't create suttas to be disposed at the first place. Or what I know is that most temples, if they receive it somehow, then we call it hua diao. So basically we burn it, respectfully, of course. Yeah, but in my opinion, let's try not to create that. Yeah, if we know that eventually we are going to just burn it, yeah. If we were to copy a sutra, you should copy with the intention to use it. Yeah. So if like, let's say you would like to have, for example, you want to have a copy of Heart Sutra now, and you don't want to and you want to copy the Heart Sutra, then maybe don't go and get a copy. Just download from the internet and then do a proper copy. Do it once, sui. Yeah, do it once, and then after that use that as your copy. Yeah. Or if you want to copy for others, this is one thing. While the giving of Dhamma excels all give, yeah, Dhammapada, sometimes it's good to check whether the other person would appreciate it, because sometimes people just give Dharma gift to others without checking if they are, open or they would appreciate that. Then you give it to that person, and the person is stuck with the Dharma book or your copy of the sutra, and the person may be like, what do I do with it? Yeah. So Doreen, from what I know, what we usually do is we will either burn it or we will wrap it up properly, you know, do some dedication, and then we will dispose of it. Yeah, but try not to create it at the first place. So Alison, further question. Sorry, one side question, if possible. Is the restlessness under 5 hindrances the same as the restlessness under the 10 fetters? Yes, it's the same thing altogether. Same restlessness. Yeah. Okay. So I think that's all we have for today. Thank you for sharing your thoughts here. Rosie asks, can we keep after copying? Of course you can keep. But as I said, if you already have one copy, creating 10 copies of the same sutra, how do I put it? You see, the whole idea about, I explained earlier, the whole notion of copying sutra in the past was simply to create copies of it so that many other people can have access to the sutra. It's different from the way it's practiced today. Today it's practiced as an end by itself, that merely copying it is meritorious. I would like to beg to differ, because if you just copy and then just keep it in the shelf, you know, you copy and don't give it out, you copy and then just keep it in the shelf, it's not it's not like going, how do I put it? We need to remove our materialistic habits. Oh, I copy one set, I have n merits. I copy m sets, then I have n times n merits. In this case, it doesn't quite work that way. Yeah, because you are just replicating things that nobody is reading. Because if you think about it, if that works, then I have an easier way for you to create merits. Yeah, just download a PDF of Heart Sutra, and then very simple, you know, on your PC, copy Control C, and then go, you know, in the file explorer, Control V, Control V, Control V, Control V. Yeah. Does that create more merits? No. It just means that there are more copies of it that no one is reading. Yeah. I mean, I would love if that is a convenient way of creating merits, but I see no rationale to justify, you know, that translating to merits. Yeah, so I would seriously not encourage people to copy as an end by itself. As I said, Doreen and Rosie, listen carefully, and whoever is into copying of sutra. Now, I'm not here to demand or to say you all must listen to my advice. Okay, whoever is into copying sutra, by all means do what you think is necessary. But my suggestion would still be, if you're going to do your copying of sutra practice, get those books, sutra books that is printed specifically for copying, with the words, there's an outline. Then use a brush, dip with water, plain water, and you can practice writing the Chinese characters. I don't know whether there are any such books for English, yeah, but the ones I know so far are all in Chinese, because this practice is predominantly found in Chinese Mahayana Buddhism. Yeah, that way you can write all you want many times, yeah, on that one set. You don't have to throw it away, you can just reuse it. Okay, if you still choose to go and copy new ones, I hate to say this, but this is your problem. Yeah, I think there are many venerables who have shared this in many talks already, but somehow lay people, it's very funny. I mean, some people, maybe not lay people, but there are so many practices out there Why do we keep on getting fixated with copying of sutras? Because the original practice of copying sutra was never as an end by itself just to accumulate merit. It was to help people have access to the Dharma. It then produced merits. The aim was not simply to produce merits, The aim was to help people have access to Dharma. It's just like I share Dharma with the aim that people can learn Dharma that can help them to maybe untie some knots, maybe become more peaceful, maybe become happier. Not exactly with the intention, let me give Dharma talk to have merits. You see the difference? Yeah. So, we told and given those sutra to copy and bring to temple during the waterland puja to dispose. Well, if for Doreen and Rosie, if you were instructed by some temples to copy and then to bring to them to burn and dispose during the waterland puja, and you choose to follow that instruction, then just follow that instruction. Don't have to consult me, okay? Yeah. But if you ask me, learn the sutra. Yeah. The Buddha didn't give teachings for it to become a sutra for people to just copy. The Buddha gave teachings to enlighten us, to help us remove ignorance, to have wisdom, not for us to just make copies of it. But, well, Amitabha. Yeah, I'm glad this was brought up. Yeah. So thank you everyone for sharing the practices you have. If there are some practices that you mentioned that I didn't really go into and you'd like me to elaborate more, feel free to drop a message and then I will try to touch on it the following week. Yeah. And that's all we have for today. Take care. Let's do dedication. 愿消三障诸烦恼，愿得智慧真明了，普愿罪障悉消除，世世常行菩萨道。阿弥陀佛，起立。